today we're going to be continuing on with Meshmixer, which is not a 3D modeling program like Tinkercad, which is what we did last week, but it is a way to manipulate 3D models that you've created either in other programs or that you found online. So a crash course review here. We last class downloaded Meshmixer. So if you haven't downloaded it yet, don't worry, you're not alone. This is the download link. So pause your video and write that in and get everything ready if you haven't done it yet. Again, remember to download the right one. If you're on a Windows, you're probably going to download the x64, unless you're on a really old machine, in which case it'll be the x32. Agree to any of the license agreements, yada yada yada. The first screen that you'll see will look somewhat like this. I do want you to be clicking on the rabbit button because that will import a mesh that already exists in the program of a rabbit, and that's what we're going to be working with today. Most of what we did last class is sort of getting used to the program and learning a little bit about navigation and some of the options. This is just a quick review on what we did Monday. For those that either had some issues with the webinars or had to miss Monday's webinar for whatever reason. So just bear with me for a couple minutes before we get to a new spot. I'm trying to go really quick to not bore you folks, not bore y'all if you had already been to Monday's webinar, for example. So what we did on Monday, we learned about the navigation, which is very similar to Tinkercad. So if you want to change how things look, just in terms of seeing your objects, right-clicking, holding is rotate, pan is clicking your center scroll wheel, and zoom is rolling your scroll wheel. So again, quick overview of the toolbar. There is no new option in Meshmixer. There's only import since we cannot just build anything from nothing. We're just going to be importing stuff. And remember, if something does end up importing sideways, there is an option, and I need to actually open up Meshmixer myself. There is an option on the import screen that will let you, hang on one second, folks. There's an option to flip ZY on import export, so if it is sideways, go ahead and click that. And normally, if you're going to add something, you're going to hit append if you're going to add something to an existing sort of iteration. So if I wanted to add another model to this rabbit, I would hit append on the import screen. So let's see here. Meshmix, again, quick recap, just gives you a whole bunch of different shapes and cool stuff that you can add into your design. Select will let you select portions or all of your design, and I'll go over more specific in terms of review later. Sculpt will let you sculpt your object, and it will also let you paint it. We'll be painting a little bit later in class today on our object. So I'm just going to skip stamp. Edit we'll be using a lot later today as well. It lets you, this is actually what lets you move stuff around. I didn't mention that on Monday, but if you use the transform button underneath edit, you will be able to move whatever 3D shapes are on your screen. So again, all I did is edit and transform. Now I can click to move stuff up or down or sideways or whichever way I'd like to move it. So, and I'll mention that again a little bit later. Analysis, we'll use this later today too. Shaders, if you click one and drag it over to your rabbit, for the most part they work. They will just color the entirety of your design, but they don't always work. Export and print, we will go over a little bit later today too as well. So I just went over a lot of these very quickly, so let's go see where I am in terms of this, yada yada yada. Alright, so the next thing we did on Monday, and again folks, I am going as fast as I can. I'm trying not to bore you if you've already seen this. Again, there is some folks who, partially due to my fault, did not get the webinar invites. So that's why I am going over this again really quickly. So what we ended up doing is adding some arms to our design. And I see a question real quick. You're downloading it, it's taking forever. Yep, that'll do it, especially when you're on when you're doing a webinar, because it does take a lot of bandwidth up. So, yeah, sorry about that. So what we did to add arms to our design, we went into the Meshmix tab, we hovered over primitives, and we moved our mouse over to arms. What I ended up doing is clicking and dragging an arm over to our rabbit and playing around with that. And I'll show you what all this stuff means in just a second. The question is this a review of what we did last year on Meshmixer? It's very, very similar to what we did last year on Meshmixer. In fact, I believe it is the exact same presentation. Therefore, if you've already used Meshmixer in the past and you feel like you're a pro at it, which unless you use it a lot, I doubt you are. If you're very familiar with Meshmixer, I do want you to go into Tinkercad and start building something. And when I say familiar with Meshmixer, I mean if you took this class last semester and remember literally everything I have been saying, then you can go into Tinkercad and build some designs. If you've never used it, please stay with me. But I very much doubt you are a pro at Meshmixer, because I most certainly am not myself. So unless you're using it often, I'd recommend staying with me. So again, if you're not familiar with it, that's what I'm here for. That's what we're learning today. I'm not trying to leave anybody in the dust. And I'm going really fast just to keep everybody sort of on the same page. It's 80%. Okay, you're doing pretty good then, time-wise here. So let's see where I'm at. Alright, so we were adding some arms and stuff to our design. Or that's what I was talking about, review-wise. So we added a couple arms, and I showed what the controls were, but before I did that, I see another question. Okay, I got you, Josiah. So before I talk about moving the arm and everything, when you do add an arm, there's a whole bunch of different options that come up in a menu called drag and drop. Go ahead and play around with these if you haven't yet already. I'm not going to go over exactly what these all do, but it's pretty clear what they do if you take a look at it. If you drag the slider up or down to increase the values that are here. So I'm not going to go over what all these do. There's also another way you can do it, and they're actually going to be on the part itself. So again, the big things to remember about adding stuff: the globe here in the middle will let you move it. It'll keep your object perpendicular to the surface, so it does move in real time. If you click inside of the circle right here, that'll let you rotate it. Oh man, I always forget what this guy does. It just brings up another set of tools if you click on the circle right here. And on the second set of tools, there's a couple of flags that'll come out. Oops, why are you lagging so much? So the one that is along the surface of your object will twist the arm like taffy. It'll keep the base in place, it'll just twist your arm, but, oh my goodness, it's hard to get a good representation of. Alright, and there's one that's also perpendicular, just like your arm itself is. This will let you move the angle of the arm. So if you're just now getting everything downloaded, go ahead. On the very first screen, after you accept the license agreement, I want you to click on the little bunny icon that is on the bottom left of the gray screen. Do you see what I'm talking about there? You don't have anything on your screen? Have you opened up Meshmixer yet? Make sure you run that program you just downloaded, that'll install it. And then you can go ahead and open it if you don't see anything. was I? I was talking about the one that's normal to it. You can move the angle of the arm. You mean you haven't done anything? Oh, okay. I just want you to right now, Josiah, to go ahead and you see the blank gray screen that looks sort of like this? Let me see where I can find it. If you see this, I just want you to click on the bunny rabbit. You have the bunny? Okay. So then what I want you to do is go into Meshmix, hover over primitives, and click on arms. You're going to pick the first arm. You're going to click and drag it onto the bunny. And that's all we're going to do right now. While I'm doing my review, I do recommend playing around with the options. I know you've been installing stuff, so you haven't been able to totally pay attention to the review, and that's okay. Something that you'll get to work on indefinitely now that you have the program. So where was I? Yada yada yada. Blah, blah, blah. I was on select, or I was finishing the arm, and I was going on the select tool here. So to look around, hold down the right mouse button on your mouse, and you can rotate around from there. Just like, well, I guess you didn't get to do Tinkercad, so never mind that. Alright. Oh my goodness, what's happening? Okay. And of course I'm getting a phone call, which I'm going to ignore. Alright. Selection. You don't have a mouse. Okay. Anybody without a mouse know how to... I mean, you have you have the ability to right click, right? Even without a mouse? Then go ahead and just right click. Now in terms of zooming, I'm not entirely sure to do that without a mouse. Does anybody have any insight on that? Because I'm not entirely sure myself. So no insight? Okay. I'll figure out what that is in a second. Alright. So we then talked about selections. So using the select tool, if you want to select, say, what's going on? Say the whole arm, you just double click it. Nope. What did I do wrong there? Oh. I'm not entirely sure what I just did. Basically, I'm just going to skip the entire select. I'm going to tell you how to use the box selection, since we will probably use that later today. To use the box, or the relative selection, there's two ways to do it, either box or laser cut. You click the select button, you click on the object that you will end up selecting. The box selection, all you have to do is click and hold your left mouse, and notice that whatever you select is orange. Or what you can do is a laser cut, where again you click on the object, you just do a line, it'll select anything on the other side of the line. So, did that bring us to where we were last class? Is that where we are? Did I miss anything? Alright, I don't think I missed too much yet. Alright, so what we're going to do then, we are going to select one of the, on your object, depending on whatever object it is that you're using. For the rabbit, for example, if you're using the rabbit, I want you to select just the tail with the select tool by clicking select, clicking on your rabbit, and then just doing one solid laser cut along to select the tail. Alright, so all you gotta do for the laser cut is just that one solid shoop, and it should select all of it. So once we have selected, it's not working. So again, if you need to remember how to use the select tool, I'm going to click select. We're going to click on the tail of the rabbit or wherever you want to click. And we're going to, with our left mouse button, we're just going to draw the straight line, let go, and it should select all of this. Did it work? To select the tail, you first have to go click on the select tool, which is the third from the top on the left-hand side. If you do that, a box will pop up and there should be a red dot and a dark gray sort of target around your mouse cursor. I want you to click on the tail. It'll just leave, a little orange piece, and that's okay. Then I want you to click outside of the tail and draw a straight line along the intersection of the tail and the rabbit's butt. That does not happen. What happens? You hit the select tool and the orange dot doesn't show up. The orange dot won't appear until you click on the rabbit's tail. If you're talking about the red dot, it should always be following your cursor. But to get the orange dot, you'll have to click on it. And again, if you can't get this, it's not a big deal. This is the last day we're going to be working with Meshmixer. So don't fret, it's not like we're going to be working with this for weeks and weeks like we did with processing. Alright, so don't worry, just pay attention. It might behoove you to later on watch Monday's video instead of watching my crash course from today. So once you've selected the rabbit's tail, I want you to go to Edit, and was it Erase and Fill, I think? Yeah, Erase and Fill. So what that's going to do, it's going to erase the tail as much as it can, given your user input, and it's going to replace it with just sort of a mesh. It's not going to replace it with anything in particular. It might look a little bit weird just depending on how you ended up cutting the tail off, but basically you're just cutting the tail off. And you could do that for, any piece of your rabbit. You can cut off part of its ear. Luckily it's just a mesh, it won't hurt it too bad. But I do want you to remember that once you've successfully cut the tail off, and if you want to play around with these sliders, you can do that just to change sort of the appearance here. Just remember to click accept. And it should quite successfully change your rabbit's tail. So to close the select thing, I normally just click off of it, but there's a couple other ways you can do it. You can click on any of these other options on the left hand side to close the select tool. In fact, you might have more fun playing with a tool that's not the select tool. So let's see where we're at here. So click accept when you're done, else nothing's going to happen. Oh, you mean the box on the left-hand side here? How do you close that? There's not really a good way, or do you mean this right here? How do you close that? Anyways, this box is closed by the X in the right-hand corner. This box you can't really close very easily. It's always going to be something on the side of your screen. You just kind of have to deal with it. So if you've deleted the bunny's tail, we're going to be adding a polyhedral tail to the bunny. So to do that, we're going to go into the Meshmix box. Going to hover over arms. And we're going to go back to primitives. So even if you're having trouble with the select tool, you can still do this. So underneath primitives, you'll see this looks like a, I don't know how many sides are on it, but it looks like a D20. We're going to click and drag this bad boy onto the rabbit's butt where the new tail is going to go. Alright. You did get it? Alright, good deal. So make sure your tail is aligned and looks good. You can play around with it, to make it bigger or smaller or make it, blend in a little bit better. But the big thing that we're going to be looking at is going to be underneath this composition mode. There's a drop-down box. And by default, there's this thing called append to mesh. But underneath it, there are a couple other objects, or a couple other options here. Alright, we've got create new object, Boolean Union, and Boolean subtract. So let me tell you a little bit about these. Before I tell you about these, how do you get the tail like that? So all I did here, now that you've deleted the tail, I go to Meshmixer, or Meshmix rather. I hover over whatever is on top right here. So before I had arms, but I want to hover over arms and go down to primitives, so that primitives is written right here. You're scrolling down to the fourth option. Oh, to delete the tail, you have to do that weird select thing. But because you're having issues with the select thing, I'm just having you add the tail on top of the existing tail. So Meshmix, make sure primitives is right here, and we are selecting the D20, clicking and dragging it over to your rabbit's butt. You deleted the tail. You don't have to delete the tail if you're having trouble with the select tool. Don't worry about it. You can just do it on top of the tail. But if you've successfully deleted the tail, you can just add this where the tail was. Or if you haven't successfully deleted it, go ahead and just put it on top. So what I was mentioning is that there are two different classes of objects in this program. Okay, alright, I'm going to tell you how to delete the tail. Okay, so what I'm going to do, all I'm doing right now is Control Zing to get back to the point where I'm at. So again, if you want to delete the tail, you're listening to me, you're watching me, right? I'm not going to say this anymore. I've already said it like 50 times. To delete the tail, you first want to click the Select tool. Alright? You're just going to click it. Did you click it? Okay. When you move your cursor over top of the rabbit, do you see sort of what you see right here with the red dot and the gray circle around it? Do you see that? You do. Alright, I want you to click, just like you normally click your mouse, once on the tail. Okay? Did you do that? Okay. Now I want you to rotate your view so that you're looking at the tail from the side. Did you do that? Alright. So you should see this orange thing there. You see it? That means you've selected the object. That's a good thing. That's what we want. Now if you click your mouse just somewhere, let's say right about here, click and hold down your mouse button, and you're just going to make a straight line at the base of the tail. And once you've finished the whole line, you're going to unclick. If you do that right, your whole tail is going to be orange. Do you see that? From here, if your tail is orange, you're going to go into Edit in the upper left-hand side of your screen, and click the first option, which is Erase and Fill. You did that? Yeah, it's going to be smooth. It looks pretty good. And once you do that, click Accept right here. And it is going to look smooth. It's not totally erased, but it's definitely not quite as there as it was. But once you do that, click Accept. And now you're where we are. Well, actually, you're not quite there. We're almost there. Did you click Accept? Because once you click Accept, I want you to go into Meshmix. Primitives is going to be at the top of your screen here. And if it's not, you can go ahead and scroll to it. And you're going to put the little shape, you're going to click and drag over there. And that's where we're at right now. So I'm really sorry that I got frustrated. There's just 7 other people here. And I want everybody to learn as much as they can. And it's okay if your shape is a different color. Color doesn't matter. So no worries. So alright. So what I was talking about is this composition mode, append to mesh, and then these 3 options underneath append to mesh. And if it's gray, If it's gray, do you still see this drop solid screen? Because if you click out of it, you're not going to be able to, or actually, we're going to keep the tail there, so that's fine if it's gray, don't worry. Alright, so where we're at, there's two different classes of objects in Meshmixer. And that's okay, don't worry. I'm just going to show you real quick what this does, but we're going to keep the tail as it is. So the two different kinds of objects are primitives, which just like in Tinkercad are solid objects. And then we have meshes, like the arm. So note the different symbols here. On the arm, there's sort of like a hollow shell, just like our primitives are, or sorry, our meshes are anyway. Remember, a mesh is just like a skin. And then we have a box to indicate that the primitive is like a solid object. So solid objects in Meshmixer use something called Constructive Solid Geometry, or CSG, to merge objects. It's basically a fancy way for math to be performed on shapes. It's just a fancy way to say it. So constructive solid geometry involves taking a couple simple shapes and either adding them together, which is called union. So you have a sphere and a cube, you throw them together, and you get something that looks like a sphere and a cube. That's called union. You can subtract, which will subtract, it'll subtract the overlap and leave you with just one of your objects left. So in this case, you're subtracting the overlap on the box by using the sphere. And then we've got intersection, which deletes everything except for the parts that intersect. So you can make some pretty complicated stuff with this. But going back into Meshmixer, underneath composition mode, if you've already accepted your rabbit's tail, that's fine, don't worry, just take note right now. Under composition mode, you'll notice that there are three options here. The first is create new object. Can anybody guess what create new object is going to correspond with on CSG? Anybody want to take a guess? Especially given that the other two are Boolean Union and Boolean Subtract. Which one of these is create new object? Which type of CSG is it doing? It's going to create a new object, but which one of these three, union, subtraction, or intersection, will the create new object do? Yeah, it's going to do intersection. So Boolean Union, just like this. Boolean Subtraction looks like this, but creating a new object will just take the intersection of your two objects and make a new object out of the intersection. So it's not the end of the world if you don't quite understand that. It's just a kind of a cool thing to take a look at. Interception. It's not football season anymore. But what we're going to be wanting right now, remember, we want to stay away from combining, actually I haven't mentioned this yet, we want to stay away from combining meshes and primitives for the most part. So if you want to add a solid to a mesh, you can do it, but it might behave a little bit weirder later. What we're going to want to do for the most part is Boolean Union, and then click Accept. So what it'll do, it will unite these two objects. I think that it's going to make the D20 a mesh. What it's also going to do is make the intersection between the D20 and the rabbit a little bit smoother. It's hard to see here. Whoops. But it did sort of try to make the intersection smoother. So I believe if you keep it as a pen to mesh, it'll look fine right now, but it might just behave weird later. And since we're not printing, it's not going to be a big deal. But if we were to 3D print it, you'd want to be very careful about that. All right. So at this point, I'm going to teach you about painting. So I really briefly went over the Sculpt Tool last class, and even earlier today. But I do want you to remember that the color does not matter, usually, if you're going to paint something. So if you paint something and it looks really cool, unless you have a nice enough 3D printer that either has colored filament, lots of colors of filament, or a 3D printer that'll paint it for you, you're not going to get whatever colors that you painted in real life if you painted it on a program. Unless you do it yourself, or have a really nice printer or whatever, like I just said. So really quick before we start painting, I want you to hold down the spacebar on your computer real quick. It's going to bring up a menu. So we're holding on the spacebar real quick. And actually, take a look here. There is actually ways to change the camera view here. So if you don't have a mouse, there you go. But what we're looking at specifically is the one called color in the lower right. You want to make sure to select the left color. So there's two boxes. You want to select the one that's sort of blue looking. We want to do this because otherwise it's not going to show what we're painting on it. It's just going to look like this gray color and be really confusing. I actually looked this up earlier because I had that issue last semester too. I couldn't figure out how to make the color show. But yeah, to do that, hold down the space bar, click the color on the left-hand side here. So from there, we can go into the Sculpt tool. And we're going to click a whole bunch of buttons to set up our paintbrush. If we don't click these buttons to select our paintbrush, we're going to be sculpting, which will change the overall shape of the rabbit, which might be fun. It was fun last year. But for right now, we're just painting. So the first thing we're going to do is click on brushes, or hover over brushes rather, and go down to Paint Vertex. So by default, the Sculpt tool is again going to want to sculpt. It has like a chisel here. Choosing the Paint Vertex basically changes your chisel into a paintbrush, and that's wonderful. That's what we want. If you then hover over color, you can pick whatever color that you want to paint your rabbit, or whatever color you're using, or whatever object you're using. So it's good to note here, before you start painting, if you want to do some really fine painting, you can definitely change the intensity, size, everything of that. You can change it of the brush underneath here before you start painting or while you're painting. But all you got to do is click and hold down, and you're painting. And that's it. You can continue to change the color as you do some painting. You can make the size like really small for fine stuff. Oh my goodness, my mouse is messing up. And there is all sorts of different options here. If you want to make it really precise, underneath the refinement tab, you can make it your paintbrush smoother. And I haven't really played with the filters, so real quick, what I want you to do is do a very, very simple bit of painting on your object before I continue on. So you don't have to paint it entirely, I just want you to get some painting in. And if you feel comfortable with painting, give sculpting a try. Just make sure to change your brush away from the paint vertex. I'm going to give you about 2 minutes to do that. So I'm making mine look like the globe, apparently. go. So apparently you can make your own maps in this. Good to know. Rabbit map. No, I forgot to change the color. What is it doing right now? Yeah, I don't know why that's not working, but whatever. It's not letting you paint? Alright, so let's go through that process one more time. See if I can get my mouse to work a little bit better. So the first thing you gotta do to let it paint is hold down the space bar and click color. Right next to the color, you did that. Click on this bad boy here. Did you get that part? We're going to go into Sculpt. We're going to change our brush to paint. It's not letting you do anything. Which one of these on the left hand side do you have selected? Alright, you have Sculpt selected. Do you have the Paint Vertex brush selected? Alright. Do you have a color selected? You're making sure your size is not tiny. So let's say 67 or something around there. And your color's not white, right? There's actually a color right here in this box. Could it be that you don't have a mouse? I doubt it. As long as you're clicking to paint, it should be working. So I don't know what's going on with that. If you wouldn't mind saying after class, I can help you with paint. It's just not terribly critical. It's really just for your own benefit. And the planet that this is Planet Rabbit. So, okay, take care, Elijah. I'm calling it Planet Rabbit. Whenever you click, the red dot won't move when you tried to move it. That's weird. You can do the initial brush stroke, right? It won't paint where you click. You made sure that you had clicked down the space bar and clicked color. Or clicked to this button right here to the right of color. And this is in reference to Andrew right now. So hold on the space bar to get this menu. The This computer won't let you move the mouse while a key is being pressed. That is weird. And I don't think I can help you solve that problem. You can't even move the mouse when your left mouse button is selected? Not if you're pressing a key. You shouldn't be pressing a key down right now. You should literally just have your mouse in a mouse click. And you're saying it's not letting you select a color? I mean, if you have hot pink selected, Josiah, you should have a color selected. It won't paint even where you click. When you... I don't know why that's happening, Andrew. If it's any consolation, painting doesn't really do anything except for you to have fun and paint on something. So if it's not necessarily working, it's not the end of the world. I know that's not a good answer, and I'm sorry that I can't help you further. And Caleb says that he has an answer to your question, Andrew. Now, give me a second. Oh, okay, Wyatt. Bye. And so, question for Josiah was... It's not like you select a color. Even with paint vertex selected under brush? I don't know. I mean, if you did click the space bar down and made sure that the button directly next to color was down, it should be working. Um, Is the email you have written down, Josiah, the one that you use regularly? Alright, so for Andrew, I'm literally copying and pasting what the fix for the problem was. I haven't tried it myself, I don't know. When you hold down space, you don't... Oops. When you hold down space, you don't see this this menu at all. I was talking to Josiah right now, but you click this blue thing next to color, right? You made darn sure that's clicked. It won't let you click on it? Well, I don't know. I had trouble with the color last year as well. So